Okay. Hi. Okay. Hi, everyone. Now you should. I love that this is just all everyone I love is this chat box right now. I love that for me. Hi. Can everyone hear me? Can you give me like just general, yes, we hear you, we see you, this is going great, Sruti? Okay, cool. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, thank you. Oh, this is the greatest chat box that's ever existed, Alex. It's just all my friends gassing me up right now.
I can see. Okay.
Okay, I'm dead. Thank you all so much. Welcome to the Librairie Saint-Henri live stream launch of Leicester. Please be patient with us as we deal with the realization that we are millennials but are still bad at technology. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for tuning in. I don't know what this room is, if it's a room of people who have read the book or about to read the book or in the middle of the book, but I think that it doesn't matter right now because I think that we're going to have a really great conversation, and I'm just really excited that everyone's here to participate. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat box and yeah, in the chat to everyone. And if we get time at the end, we'll try to hit some of them. Raven is going to be joined with us very soon, and she is going to read a bit from the book. I do want to stop the sound. I want to come try it out while I talk to people. And then we're going to have a bit of conversation. Like I said, if we have time, we'll get to questions. The book, for those of you who haven't engaged with it yet, is about, well, I'll tell you what it's about. It's like my first question to Raven. But essentially, there are a lot of intergenerational identities, intersectional identities at play here, which is extremely brilliantly thought out in a really heart-racing kind of read. At least that's what all of you people yourself have literally been telling me. And I'm really so grateful that despite this insane world, one of the pros is that the landscape of book touring changed a bit, and I feel like it's what granted us this opportunity. So I just want to say again how grateful we are to have Raven here. I'm obsessed with her. Okay, I'm gonna welcome her in. So Raven, let us do this. All the sounds. Hi.
Hi. Just real quick.
Yeah.
Am I sharing my screen? Because I am also a millennial who is apparently bad at technology.
Everything feels so much better.
So does everything look okay?
Yeah, everything looks okay.
Great.
I hope everyone can hear us. I think everyone can hear us.
Great.
Thanks again for coming. I'll open up the floor to you to read and listen and stare at you.
First, I want to thank you, Sruti, and Saint-Henri for having me. Like, this is really, really amazing. And thank you, everyone who's here listening. I'm going to read just like the first bit of the book because it's easiest and I don't need to preface it. So, oh boy, I just had like you know how your computer's always trying to get you to do an update? What a terrible time.
No.
So, all right, I'm going to start from the beginning. The first time we have sex, we are both fully clothed at our desk during working hours, bathed in blue computer light. He is uptown processing a new bundle of microfiche, and I am downtown handling corrections for a new Labrador detective manuscript. He tells me what he ate for lunch and asks if I can manage to take off my underwear in my cubicle without anyone noticing. His messages come with impeccable punctuation. He is fond of words like taste and spread. The empty text field is full of possibilities. Of course, I worry about IT remoting into my computer, or my internet history warranting yet another disciplinary meeting with HR. But the risk. The thrill of a third pair of unseen eyes. The idea that someone in the office with that sweet post-lunch break optimism might come across this thread and see how tenderly Eric and I have built this private world. In his first message, he points out a few typos in my online profile and tells me he has an open marriage. His profile pictures are candid and loose. A grainy photo of him asleep in the sand, a photo of him shaving, taken from behind. It is this last photo that moves me, the dirty tile and soft procession of steam, his face in the mirror, stirring with quiet scrutiny. I save the photo to my phone so I can look at it on the train. Women look over my shoulder and smile, and I let them believe he is mine. Otherwise, I have not had much success with men. This is not a statement of self-pity. This is just a statement of the facts. Here's a fact. I have great breasts, which have warped my spine. More facts. My salary is very low. I have trouble making friends, and men lose interest in me when I talk. It always goes well initially, but then I talk too explicitly about my ovarian torsion or my rent. Eric is different. 2 weeks into our correspondence, he tells me about a cancer that ravaged half his maternal family. He tells me about an aunt he had who made potions with fox hair and hemp, how she was buried with a corn husk doll she made of herself. Still, he describes his childhood home lovingly, the digressions of farmland between Milwaukee and Appleton, the yellow-breasted chats and tundra swans that would appear in his yard looking for seed. When I talk about my childhood, I only talk about the happy parts, the tape of Spice World I received for my 5th birthday, the Barbie I melted in the microwave when no one was home. Of course, the context of my childhood, the boy bands, the Lunchables, the impeachment of Bill Clinton, only emphasizes our generational gap. Eric is sensitive about his age and about mine, and he makes a considerable effort to manage the 23-year discrepancy. He follows me on Instagram and leaves lengthy comments on my posts. Retired internet slang interspersed with earnest remarks about how the light falls on my face. Compared to the inscrutable advances of younger men, it is a relief. We talk for a month before our schedules align. We try to meet earlier, but things always come up. This is just one way his life is different from mine. There are people who count on him, and sometimes they need him urgently. Between his abrupt cancellations, I realize that I need him too, in a way that makes my dreams delirious expressions of thirst, long stretches of yellow desert, cathedrals hemmed in dripping moss. By the time we set our first real date, I would have done anything. He wanted to go to Six Flags. We decide to go on a Tuesday. When he rolls up in his white Volvo, I've only made it to the part of my pre-date routine where I try to find the most appropriate laugh. I put on 3 dresses before I find the right one. I tie up my braids and line my eyes. There are dishes in the sink and a pervasive salmon smell in the apartment, and I don't want him to think it has anything to do with me. I put on a complex pair of underwear. There's not so much underwear as a bundle of string, and I stand before the mirror. I think to myself, you were a desirable woman. You were not a dozen gerbils in a skin casing. Outside, he is double parked. He leans against the car and remains like this as I come out, his eyes bright and still. His hair is darker than I expected, a black so opaque it looks blue. His face is almost obscenely symmetrical, though one of his eyebrows is higher than the other, and it makes his smile seem a little smug. It is the second day of summer, and all the city's powers have no sway over him. I reach for his hand, trying not to swallow my tongue, and something feels strange. Of course, there are nerves. In person, he is a total daddy, his face alert and hard, softened only by the slight recession of his hair. But this strange feeling has nothing to do with that, nothing to do with me looking past his sensuous mouth and slightly askew nose for any indication that he is as nervous as I am. It is that it is 8:15 a.m., and I feel happy. I'm not on the L, smelling someone's lukewarm pickles, wishing I were dead. So I'm gonna stop there.
Thank you. I love that you read those pages in particular because I actually have, it spurred some thoughts. I don't know where to start with this book, man. So the way that I've been hand selling it, because, and Alex and myself both have, like, as a bookseller, that's what you do. It's you hand selling, you actually meet people and they say, what's this book about? And then you try to sell them. every time it's happened with your book, it's like all I can do is state the facts. All I can do is just say what the book is about, and then so it's just like, oh, there's a young Black woman who meets an older white man and starts a relationship with him, and he has a married partner who is white, and they have an adopted Black daughter.
Yeah.
It's just like, and I mean, it's just like, how do you even begin to tackle stuff like that? Is kind of, I don't know, an intimidating sign. But I do wonder, is that how the book came to you? Like, were identity politics plot devices for you? Were you playing out this game, or of what kind of story would unfold with these kinds of characters? Or was it, or how did that go about?
You know, it's funny because I mean, I also during this process am learning how to describe the book. You know, when I first started, I think it was like last winter or what is time, right? It was cold, and I was trying to figure out how to talk about it for the first time. And there are so many, you know, there's a lot of kind of machinery at work. But when I first started, I truly didn't know what it was going to be. When I write, I don't really know what it's going to be. It's kind of an act of discovery for me. And for me, kind of until I get through the first third of anything, I'm not even sure it's going to work. And so with me, the starting point for this story was a familiar starting point for me, which was art. Is a thing I've constantly been writing about in my short fiction and even in like previous book attempts, you know, that didn't really pan out. I knew I wanted to write about, you know, a young Black woman who is trying to lay claim to the right to make art, and trying to juggle the demands of living, and eating with making that art. But it also, I wanted to depict, you know, a young Black woman who is led around by it and who feels desire and yearning in a way that is shameless, you know, even though like we spend a lot of time in her head where she's articulating things that she is not to the other people on the page. But yeah, for me, it really, I didn't think about, it's really now in like this post book, you know, is out in the world process where I'm kind of thinking about those questions and thinking more about what I meant and what it means. Because in the act of writing, it's almost a subconscious thing.
Right. No, that makes total sense. I feel like the language is so blunt and it cuts, I mean, I'm just repeating what a lot of the, I think, common discourse around this book has been. But I think it's so blunt and it slices you, but then like out come bouquets of flowers. Like it's just, it's and like I've noted down a couple of lines. There's some, I mean, there's so many, but you know, there's this setting that I won't try to give away too much of, but essentially there's a character in the book, Rebecca, who literally her job is to work with dead bodies. And so she's doing just that as Edie watches on. And that's horrifying, right? And there's just this line, because in an hour, a man without a brain will be a man who looks like he can dream.
Yes.
And that just like murdered me.
I love that. I mean, that's the goal, right? Is to murder. Like I kind of really just, you know, but that's, you know, I have to put my cards on the table. That specific job, you know, Rebecca as a medical examiner, that is part of, for me, it was craft and trying to write a character who is deeply studious and very much in control in the way where she knows how things are put together and so then understands how they come apart. You know, she is very much, you know, it was an extension of her character and also a thing, you know, her work as a medical examiner where they, you know, work together in the morgue a few times. I hope that's not giving too much away. Mm-hmm. You know, that traditionally was involved in like the study of art, of painting. You know, cadavers were involved. Mm-hmm. And so that was an interesting way to kind of like incorporate that. But also my mom was a medical examiner. She went back to school when I was in high school for mortuary science. And she had been like a seamstress and a caretaker beforehand. So they kind of like all went together. And I watched her work before I went to college. And so like the man who without a brain, you know, who looks like he can dream, like I watched her do that, you know. And I feel like the body is miraculous. You know, that was one of those moments where I felt it most keenly. And so I put that on the page.
That's so interesting that you say that, though. I've never known to make that kind of a personal connection, but what I also love particularly about this book is that here we have essentially what I think is like outdated as a term these days, but you know, the other woman.
Yes.
And she writes, in my opinion, with such love for Rebecca. Like you can feel it. Like it's so tender and careful. And tell me about that.
So when I knew that I was going to write about an open marriage, I you know, the wife is sort of out of view, you know, Rebecca is sort of out of view, but kind of still always in the background of this arrangement. It felt more interesting to me for her not to be like an archetypical jealous wife or an archetypical villain. You know, it gave me more material to work with to then have the question of what does it look like when you invite this, you know, when you invite this disruption to your marriage, but also to have her, you know, be getting something from the arrangement and just be a totally fully rendered and complex person herself. Because I think, you know, in the book, the relationship between Edie and Rebecca, you know, the girlfriend and the wife, is it's complex, but it's one of the kind of only relationships in the book that facilitates Edie's ability to make art, you know, and that's weird, right? Because there are fundamental differences between them. Edie is young and Black and struggling and living in a real extreme precarity that kind of brings her into the house. And Rebecca is comfortable, you know, and cannot really fathom that precarity that Edie lives in. And they have to reconcile those differences at the same time this almost romance is building between them. And those relationships between women that are like deep and that are like immediate and urgent and almost like inherently romantic are most interesting to me.
Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to get at with all of these questions is, as a reader, you put us in a lot of discomfort.
Yeah, sure.
That. And I do, and I love that. It's like, I think we all do. I think that's why we're all here. I think that's why the book is doing so well. So I can tell you that that's the experience as a reader, but I guess I'm wondering, as the writer, was it equally a moment of taking yourself places that you knew were complex and challenging to take? Was it just fun? Was it just fun to play this person who just is all of these things? Do you know what I mean? I'm not sure if I'm making sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do feel like the rule is to write toward that discomfort, though I would say like easier said than done, you know,
right.
Writing toward the specific and writing toward what's uncomfortable is, I think, what ultimately resonates, you know, with people, seeing those private, strange, intimate moments, feeling recognition. When you see that, you know, in film or on the page, those are moments that just, I feel like, stick with me most. And I try to do that in the book. But I mean, I will say I was really having fun. Like, this book was really fun for me to write. Everything I write has to have that component, or else it feels like something's wrong. You know, like if it doesn't feel fun, though, you know, not all writing's fun, some of it's you have to push through. But it really was like, I wanted it to be fun, but it also deeply wanted it to be fun for the reader. Like, it wanted to be welcoming. At the same time, it's, you know, right, it's grimy, you know, like it's dirty. Like, at the same time, I wanted it to be welcoming. But I truly, I feel like I felt not a lot of discomfort writing it. I feel like when I'm in that space, I almost can't consider the reception because that, I feel like that kind of limits me or would put fear into the writing, which, you know, I think would really kind of limit, you know, my ability to be honest.
Right. Right. I don't know. I'm like, choose the red pill or the white. I'm like, all of the questions are just like all one or the other. But of course, it's always somewhere in the middle. Like, of course.
Right.
Of course. So, okay, notoriously, you know, this is a room full of readers. I didn't mean that like passive aggressively, but you know, notoriously, people write sex bad. Men write sex bad. The sex here is so good.
Thank you.
And it's a very challenging thing, I think, to do well, almost, when as readers we've kind of read it all and seen it all, but also, I don't know. So what I loved about the sex scenes is that as a reader you're playing this intelligent game with a lot of emotional fluidity, which I think is sex. I think that's why it's so good. And I guess I'm just wondering, like, the book has such a pulse to it and it comes alive in these erotic moments, and is that like where the paintbrush was going towards? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I feel like it isn't even until this moment where I've had to more deeply consider the sex scenes in the book in talking about them with people, where I'm realizing that there is like a school of thought where sex is totally irrelevant in fiction, and that doesn't make much sense to me. You know, I think that and I mean, like, sex in the way, like, it's important when a character isn't having it, and in fact I think you know, that's some real estate in the book is taken up with, like, Edie not having sex and wanting to have sex and what that feels like, that building, you know, of tension inside of her. But, you know, for me, sex is character, and it's definitely character for a, you know, for a protagonist, for a speaker who is so deeply situated in her body, and who is seeking that kind of emotional and carnal connection, like almost kind of wildly. So, you know, the depiction of sex in the book, like, it was important for me not to kind of overcorrect, to pretty it up, because I think, you know, I actually think that it is like, sex is prettier when it's ugly, you know, like it's sexier when it makes room for, like, the silliness, the parts that are awkward, you know, and it, you know, in those moments, like when Eric and Edie have sex for the first time, like, you get to watch two characters communicate in an entirely different language, you know, and that is really, really fun to play with. And also, just in terms of writing, it's just like, it's fun. It's really fun.
This book seems so fun to write. Like, I you know, I mean that in the highest of compliments.
No, thank you. That was my intent.
But it's just, it's like that, again, I think that's why it's getting all of the attention that it's getting, because I think that's a feeling that's resonating with a lot of people. I think people are looking at your book and the writers themselves, I am anyways, and I'm thinking, oh, it could be so fun. So fun. So I read this book a couple of months ago, and I remember, like, bookmarking it in my head, you know, come fall, this is going to be something. Of course, the world was also another crazy place back then, so I didn't really know what the future was going to look like. But I remember my immediate reaction when reading it was like a heavy sigh and needing to put it down and like go talk to somebody. Like, it was very experiential and heavy. And then the promo season kept coming up, like publicity season kept coming up, and of course everyone was talking about your book, and I realized that it was really getting promoted as a comic, as like the most hilarious book ever. Like, this is gonna be, and I just remember that shift in perception. And then of course I came to the book again closer to this event, and it's so funny.
Thank you.
Like, I just missed it's not that I missed it, I guess, but I guess it's a testament to how the book can be reread. But I just wanted to go down, like, there are some lines when Edie is talking to an ex, we'll say, Mark, and she says, I never said no to you, not to anything. That documentary about Norwegian puppetry was 3 hours long.
Boy, that was fun. I mean, that was fun to write. And like that I mean, that I kind of drew from real life, honestly, you know.
I mean,
but no, I don't think there's like a wrong way to read it, because it has both qualities, where it is like, this book has dark corners, you know, this book is heavy. Edie is you know, living at the intersection of like these kind of, she's female, she's Black, and both of those things have great bearing, you know, on her life and whether or not she actually has access to her art, whether or not, how she can, you know, behave at work, how she behaves in these romantic interactions with Eric and with Mark, or with like the battery of men she's with at work, and she lives in a really kind of precarious state. So you watch her a lot of the time. You see her in the first part of the book. She's at work, and you kind of watch a human trying to rise to the occasion. You know, rise to meet these like brutal capitalist demands and failing. You know, trying to grapple with making her art and failing. You know, like that was important for me to talk about. But also there are jokes, you know, like there are jokes. And I'll say, when I first started writing this book, I didn't intend for this to be a funny book. You know, I didn't really. But as I wrote, I think there is a brutality and a joy, you know, but a brutality to Edie's life that almost necessitates a kind of resignation on her part to get through it. And that understatement that's kind of within that resignation is humor, right? Because of like the how hyperbolic her environments are and her almost understated response. That friction is strange and absurd. Like the friction between her interior, where you see her candid, you know, her candid thoughts, you see her darkness, and like the performance, that is against the performance, that too is absurd. So I think the comedy is coming from the friction, is coming from her rage mostly.
That makes absolute sense. I just feel like, I guess it just goes back to the kind of bluntness that I'm talking about. But you know, you take a moment to build this up in the book itself, but Edie's parents, we learn about them, and there is a very like Freudian aspect to the entire storyline. You even make a joke about it at some point, literally a joke about Freud. And you know, so we wonder, how has Edie come to suffer from all this intergenerational trauma, and how is it coming out in her own experiences? But it's not a very linear line necessarily that you make. But what I love about it is, and again, this is the thing about being the reader, right? I'm just like, I could be getting it totally wrong. But for me, it felt like a thing of, because Edie was forced to see so much, her eyes are now kind of wide open all the time.
Yeah.
And how beautiful is that? And it's because of that we get to be there with her in this.
Right. Well, there's also like the hypervigilance that you kind of almost need to have as a Black woman moving through the world, right? Like that requires a deep studiousness, you know, so that you can live and survive and perform. And also she's an artist, so she's naturally kind of oriented to observe in a way that is almost like inappropriately close. But yeah, no, the family, the legacy element is so important. Because I wanted there to be context around, like it's one thing to kind of introduce a character who makes like dysfunctional choices, and to make those choices almost a punchline. And I think it's another to at least attempt to create a context around them that that adds some sort of, that shows that those choices don't happen in a vacuum, that shows how the character was made. And in this case, her parents are, they both have complex relationships to feeling. Her father is an older veteran who is kind of like deadened by war and like the treatment of his country, by the treatment by his country, and her mother is a recovered addict who can't really feel anything, and you watch Edie in her adulthood desperately trying to feel and not knowing how, and so like I think those family, those familial elements are deeply formative, but I also it was important for me to include that and even include the parents' so that I was trying to tell a more humane story about not necessarily just like look at these choices independently of how they're formed, but look at all of these human responses and how those human responses become something that's almost like heritable.
Yeah, I think about that stuff like all the time. It's really profoundly done in the construction of Edie, I feel, but there is kind of this almost, it's not one or the other, it's a reversal, it's a push or pull, but there's another push or pull that I really liked about Edie, which is, how there's like, there's the kind of people who say this happened to me, and then there's the kind of person who says I happened to that.
Yeah.
And there's just the different ways of just approaching that thought. I feel like exactly Edie was never one or the other, but what I love so much about her is that sometimes she was very aware that she was happening too, and the power in that, right? Yeah. Like the fact that it doesn't necessarily have to be this like submissive it's like it's like where it is that's to right. Be in that place. Okay, yeah, talk to me.
Like I feel like that's like a super like kind of complex question when you come to the page as like a writer of color, even what like it looks like when a character is active versus passive, because like it's funny, I think Edie is almost unreal in the way that to the degree that she is active. Mm-hmm. She makes these very, very bold and almost confident, wrong but confident choices that in the real world, like that I perhaps, I wouldn't let myself into my, married boyfriend's house, like I wouldn't. I would be, she is aware, like when she's in that in the suburbs, of the way her body is imperiled. But in that knowledge, I think that influences, our behavior in a way that it actually isn't entirely influencing Edie. She is, I wanted to write her as a really like a free and chaotic, like free to be chaotic, Black woman. And yes, she is absolutely happening to things. Like things are not just happening to her. Like that was important for me, especially when it came to the sex, where I didn't position her as like a passive object where these sort of small violences happen to her, but she invites them, and like, what does that mean? That is a trickier thing when you're talking about that with a Black woman.
Yes. I mean, another one of the things that I think is so dangerous about this book, I don't think I've used the word dangerous in like so long, but I mean it in this context, is the appeal of the subversion of the narrative of the younger woman with the older man, and you add race on top of that. And there's a very popular rhetoric in the world of when it comes to how to talk about sexual violence and things like that, obviously. But I feel like what's so fun about Edie is she isn't the victim, or like certainly just like beyond most certainly isn't the victim. Like this is where I go back to about her being so embodied in her experiences. I also had this other line that I really loved, where you have Edie talking about her love of disco, and she says, but the beauty of the disco is the too much. like the capital T, the capital M. And it's like, I don't know if you could talk a little bit more about that in relation, particular to her relationship with Eric.
So, I mean, like that's me. That's me, you know, trying to convert everyone to like disco god, you know, like I love disco. And like, right, like that beautiful Donna Summer, you know, like her spirit isn't that poster. It's beautiful. But like I wanted, you know, in the disco part, you know, I wanted to make room for joy, and I wanted to make room for the earnest as opposed to the ironic, because there is that pressure with her character of the things that we are witnessing in her mind, you know, those sort of candid, that rage, you know, up against the performance that is much neater, and perhaps less authentic. I wanted for there to be some unfettered joy on the page, but you know, with her and Eric, you know, how they relate to each other. Yeah, it was important for me to be clear in my positioning that, at least in this way, you know, she is a victim of, you know, of her country, of her economy, you know, of like, you know, many of her environments, and she's doing her best and having a human response to many of them, and the human response is messy, you know. But in this respect, she absolutely is not. You know, she engages in this, you know, in this behavior and arrangement with full consent. And I have to be honest, of course, you know, as much as I wanted to be free on the page when I was writing this, you know, I thought, oh, you know, is this a horrible, unfeminist thing to do? Because I care about that. Like I do, of course, I do care about that. But I think my feminism is such where I feel that there should be room should be made to allow women to assert their desire, however it looks. And for me, it was important for me to show her asserting this agency in this moment, even though it is different, right? Because she's inviting this violence and leaning into this annihilation, right? But there is like freedom to that surrender for a person like her who is entirely out of control. You know, it's interesting. She's a person who is out of control, and so in seizing that, you know, in embracing that almost, that is its own kind of means to assert control. So, I mean, but it's still really, I'm still learning how to talk about it.
Yeah.
But it is one of those things that I wrote that just came out of my fingers, and I had to make sense of it later, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I love it. After I finished this book, I was like, I loved all the hard questions that it asked, and I loved it. But, you know, you never know, and I can imagine in your perspective too, like how a reader is, like what's kind of the limit between all of these things. You know, we've addressed the humor in this, the like horror in this, the like sexiness in this, the like genderedness of this, like so many layers here. And I do think that the thing that sticks out the most is Edie's boldness, but then comes along a kid.
Yeah.
But then comes along a kid, and I mean, I don't know, that I was that there was an emotional pull there. Of course there was, but I guess why a kid to soften Edie?
So, I mean, I wanted to show two Black women who are at different points in that kind of self-actualization. Like they're both, Edie more complicit in choosing environments that cannot witness her and cannot see her. But like they're both isolated people. They're both lonely people. Akila, you know, for reasons that are truly, honestly, beyond her control, you know, she has finally secured some stability with a family. She's seen too much, you know, for how old she is. Yeah. Like her like I don't actually, you know, her knowledge of herself and her environment is actually like a deeply tragic thing. to be like a wizened child is like, there's never, I think, really a great story behind that. But it's like this book where there are two Black women trying to seek purchase in each other. I think these were the most tender moments in the book, and I needed to make room for tenderness. I needed to make room for joy, and I needed to definitely make room for two Black women finding comfort in each other, even though they are absolutely different people, right? You know, Akila's trust naturally, you know, because she is kind of dealt with instability, you know, for most of her life. Her trust has to be earned. You know, she's like, you know, a teenager, and you know, and Edie is kind of on her own journey of claiming her art. But it was important for me that they share these, you know, these moments of tenderness and intimacy, like when they do each other's hair, you know, like I needed that, not to only have Black women on the page defined by their trauma, or, you know, the sort of, defined by their trauma. I wanted to show two Black women who both have joy. And with Akila, that's meeting Edie in a way and finding, you know, a kinship with, you know, an older, you know, Black woman who's still trying to figure things out, you know, but who has something to give her. But also she, you know, Akila too is a huge geek, like I am, you know, and so it was important for me that
talk about that,
have Comic-Con, you know, that she have her video games, you know, as I did. And I think too, like maybe partly that was why a child, you know, I wanted to talk about what that looks like when you're grappling with becoming yourself as a Black girl, and the way you know, almost the way fandom facilitates that, you know. I wanted to write about that because I love it, but also I think I wanted to give Akila that as well.
I loved her so much. She was me. She's so tender. And yes, like, okay, she's a nerd. But I mean, I really did. I'm just hard on my sleeve here. I saw a lot of myself in her.
Okay.
But it is such an interesting pull and a world, and I totally understand it. You know, I was also a huge fan of comics. The first novel I ever read was The Death of Superman.
Oh, wow.
Which is like, but that's not a normal example of a novel, nor is it a normal example of a comic book. It's like,
right.
so,
yeah.
But I think that like kind of explains, I don't know what I love so much about it. And I loved when they went to San Diego, well, when they went to New York Comic Con, sorry. I said San Diego because I've been.
Oh, I still haven't gotten there. That's
it's an experience. I've exhibited there. I was working there, and it is such a specific experience that you nail to the core.
Oh, thank you.
I saw the piece that had come out too recently where you talk about it a bit more. But I guess talk to me about Akila and making that a huge part of her life, of her joy.
Sure. So I mean, like that was important for me to have. You know, her fandom is both like a thing of joy and a thing of secrecy. You know, like I feel like fandom for a lot of people who are coming up, before, like I think you grow up and you claim it fully. It's almost like I talk to a lot of, you know, millennials who are like, you know, in our 30s now and late 20s, and a lot of them report, oh, what a dirty secret that was, you know, like before, you know, it became a thing that was okay and cool and mainstream, which I don't want to sound like a, you know, like, it's, you know, but there's an element to that secret world that you have when you're invested in fandom. You know, she writes fan fiction, like she wants a story to go on, and Edie reads her journals, you know, she snoops. And in that scene, I did want, you know, to explore Akila's fandom, but also for it to lead to that moment where Edie tells her that what you've written is good, you know, because this book too is about women affirming each other in like the things that they generate. Right. With fandom, like it is like disco, you know, it is like an earnest space. Like it is a real big, like too much, you know, like the way disco is too much communal space And this book too, right, is about how these women kind of fumbled towards that communion. And I wanted to, like, it was natural. It was a natural fit to kind of to be writing about fandom, to be writing about what it is to like really love a thing, because that I think is what defines fandom, is like a real earnest engagement, like a real, like an uncool kind of unabashed love.
It's the best kind.
Yes.
It's the best kind. You know, there is no guilty pleasure, right? Like,
right, that's right.
I guess, okay, I'll make this. If anyone has questions, by the way, feel free to send them, or Alex can send them my way. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about is you are also a painter. And I want to talk about how different this space was in comparison to that of color and a brush. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, they're very different modes for me. At the same time, they're also linked. You know, painting was the very first creative pursuit that I felt really serious about, and so it then was also the first time I felt that, I think, really universal frustration of not feeling like you had the capability or the tools to effectively communicate the thing that was in your mind. You know, like, I remember those early moments of painting and like feeling the thing that I wanted to communicate, and then looking at my canvas and just feeling like spiraling, you know, like, oh, it's not, how do I get the thing that's in my mind onto the canvas? And same with writing. It's always better in your mind, you know. But for me, because painting was a thing I really loved, and a thing that was defined by grappling with those real artistic limits, like, that is a thing that I'm obsessed with unpacking on the page, like what it looks like to kind of to have to, you know, to have to create even while failing, what it looks like to fail forward. And I keep coming to failure, but I think that is it's deeply instructive, and it's a huge part of any kind of art making process. And so they're linked in that way, where I'm constantly writing about what that is, and how messy and jagged that is. But painting, like, you know, more literally, painting for me is, I'm much more insecure about that. Like, I'm much less in control, and that's why I think I'm more insecure about it. But it's a thing that I disappear into, like I disappear into the page when I write. When I write, I feel the most in control as I do in life. Like, right now, I'm trying to articulate, you know, myself. I still feel, it feels like inadequate. You know, never in real time do I feel the control and the precision that I feel on the page. And I think that's partly why I love to write so much.
It's interesting because I feel like I can feel like your prose is so intimate, and I think, you know, a customer actually just messaged me today to thank me for the recommendation, which happens.
Oh, wow.
They're so nice. They're
That's so cool.
Yeah. But it literally was their words. They said, I felt like Edie had her, like, her voice in my ear, like, the whole time. There's just a proximity in the way that you write that is just so deeply intimate. And the book has a pulse, I think, is what I'm trying to say. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how best or better. That's why I'm not a critic, but say it's really good. You should believe me, and then I'm right.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess. Oh, we got a question from Kevin. He says, "Hi, Raven. I love the book. This feels like MTV, like when you get like questions from, like, I have not had this memory, and so am I right for you too? I don't know. I'm like living a childhood fantasy right now. Hi, Raven. I love the book so much. Can you talk about coming up with the thread of the dog, the gun, and what happens? I won't spoil, like, as a result, and I won't spoil the rest of it. he feels like you said so much that none of the characters explicitly address. I guess this is a hard question for you to answer too without spoiling. But,
sure. I mean, I will do my best not to spoil.
Thank you for the question, Kevin. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's so funny. In like an earlier draft of this, it was like I really struggled with understating this. Like, there's a part of me that like had to hammer home what happens with the gun and the dog, and it's like it's Chekhov's law or whatever it's called. Although I don't know if it actually adheres to like which part of the book the gun actually goes off. Right? It goes off screen.
Right.
And so part of it was as soon as Edie enters this neighborhood, she feels that surveillance, and I think a lot of readers understand how quickly that surveillance becomes violence. So I mentioned that to say that she inhabits this space understanding that she is almost deemed unworthy of inhabiting this public space. Like, her body is imperiled in an entirely different way than perhaps Rebecca's or Eric's, are in the suburbs. And so this woman that is like watching her, through the window of the entire book, who is, the owner of the dog, I wanted to plant those seeds for how that surveillance manifests, and also the fact of where that blame is sort of directed when the dog dies, right? Is all connected to the way the sort of almost inherent criminality that is assumed of this new Black person in the neighborhood, which then manifests in that last scene with Akilah and Edie. So it was more like, we know who shoots the dog, right? But that deed, which is done off screen, has real violent and concrete consequences for like the two Black people who are in that neighborhood, who were unable to claim a right to that public space. And I wanted to talk to that, the casual kind of violent act of a person who is safe, and how that manifests for two people who are imperiled. I hope I didn't spoil too much.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. It makes me think of when Edie is sent off to the task of picking up the ring.
Right, that's right.
Her. And this space where she's this other woman, and I'm so adamant about this book. And where she's occupying the space where a white woman exercises power over her, but also she has power over this white woman in some ways. I love Eric's arc.
Yeah. I'm realizing now in talking to people that it is actually there are two camps. There are two camps on Eric for sure. Yeah.
What can you tell me what they are?
He's just like this, I mean, in a way, right? Like this horrible creepy old man who Edie is sort of blanketly disgusted by, as opposed to this person who actually legitimately excites her, and kind of until she has her kind of come to Jesus moment. I mean, both things are relatively true, but it's interesting kind of beginning to talk to people and seeing their responses to these characters.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was a fun book to write. I'm sure it'll be a fun reception to get. We have another question. We're going to have to cut it a bit short, but I summarize it as essentially, how confessional does this book feel? Which I think is a question you must or be prepared for people to wonder for the rest of their lives. Like, you mean, is it autofiction? No, I think it was like, you can, she describes she wonders if you would describe the book as a roman à clef, which is like, how would and so basically she's wondering if it, based on your commentary, it doesn't sound like it was intentional to make it a reflection of an accurate life. It's not a biography, it's not a memoir, but was, I guess, the writing experience of it quite confessional? Oh, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the writing, it is a result of
my own experience, you know, living at these two intersections, and the sort of the way that pressurizes life, you know. And I think this book in a way was a like release valve, you know, in a way where because you know, I think the confessional aspect of the book is kind of facilitated by the fact that it's first person and it's an I, and it's first person in a way where what is confessed in that interior is very, very much like almost contrary to what is being expressed publicly. So we kind of hold a secret, you know, with the entire book. And I think for a lot of Black women, like that's the case, you know, because we indulge these performances to survive. And I don't, you know, like it's a really strange duality to hold. And there is rage on the page that she would have to, you know, that she would have to be constantly managing this, you know, this facade. And because we're in her mind, you know, we can see behind the mask a little bit. And yes, I think absolutely there are some real direct lines to my life, some real relief I felt to write candidly, you know, an eye that is behind the mask. But yes, I don't think like I didn't. You're right. Like I kind of didn't. When I started writing this, I didn't have real bones yet. Like I kind of just started writing how I, you know, toward a feeling. But I did want this to feel like an intimate text. You know, I wanted to write toward what was private and what felt strange and what felt almost like I'm just of the school where I think that if you write toward the thing that like you feel most lonely about, the thing that you think that no one else will really understand or connect with, you inevitably actually end up connecting with more people who find that recognition on the page or on screen and feel the relief of that.
It's just like fandom.
Right, that's right.
Okay, I think we're out of time, but this was great.
This was so wonderful.
Thank you so much. I know like it's been an insane season for you, and I'm so happy for you and all the success. And I'm just really glad that you were able to take the time to talk to us in this weird new, you know, book publishing world way. I find it was really rewarding, and I'm just really grateful that you are out there doing what you do.
No, this is really, really incredible. Thank you for doing this, and thank you for having me, and thank you everyone who is listening. Like this has really been a dream, really, truly a dream for me.
Okay, thanks, Raven. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye. Thanks, everyone. Just a quick note that we'll announce the winner of the poster and the amount that we are donating on our Instagram later today. Thanks again. Thanks for participating. Bye.